There are stories that challenge what we believe to be possible, stories that push the boundaries of what the human mind can comprehend. This is one of those stories. In the quiet town of Poughkeepsie, New York, life moved at a pace that most would call ordinary. Families gathered, children played in the streets, and neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles. But hidden within this seemingly peaceful community at 99 Fulton Avenue, an unimaginable nightmare was unfolding. It wasn't the kind of house that drew attention. It wasn't the kind of family that stood out. But inside its walls lay a secret so horrifying, so incomprehensible, that it would shake an entire community to its core. For 2 years, a predator lived among them. His victims disappeared without a trace. The search for answers grew colder with every passing day, yet all along the truth was closer than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of Kendall Francois, a story of deception, pain, and the ultimate betrayal of trust. How does a person carry on as if nothing has happened, while surrounded by the evidence of their unspeakable acts? You're about to find out. Welcome to True Crime Files. Here we bring you the stories that reveal the most shocking truths about the human experience. These are tales of mystery, tragedy, and the search for justice. Each episode takes you deeper into cases that leave us questioning everything we think we know. If you're passionate about uncovering the truth and exploring the details behind the headlines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss a new episode. And if you enjoy unraveling mysteries as much as we do, tap that like button now. Your support helps us continue to share these important stories with the world. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after this story ends. Kendall Francois was not someone you would immediately notice. At 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighing over 250 pounds, he stood out physically, but not in a way that raised alarms. To those around him, he was a quiet, reserved man who kept to himself. He worked as a detention monitor at a local middle school, a job that required patience and authority. Colleagues described him as a bit odd, someone who often made inappropriate jokes or behaved awkwardly, but these quirks were shrugged off as harmless eccentricities, nothing more. He came from a family that seemed ordinary by all outward appearances. The Francois family lived in a modest home on Fulton Avenue in Poughkeepsie, a house no different from the others on the street. It was not a house that would catch your eye or draw curiosity. His parents were known to be polite and unassuming, and his sister, though private, was considered friendly enough. Together they blended into their neighborhood like any other family. Yet Kendall's interactions with those outside his home painted a slightly different picture. At work, students often found him intimidating due to his size and stern demeanor. Some noted how he would occasionally make them uncomfortable, joking in ways that crossed professional boundaries or touching a student's hair uninvited. But such incidents were dismissed. He wasn't a man anyone feared, not in the way you might imagine. He was simply different. As the years passed, Kendall continued to move through life unnoticed. He lived under the same roof as his family, walked the same streets, and shopped at the same stores as everyone else. He was a familiar face in Poughkeepsie, someone you might pass by without a second thought, a man who faded into the background. But what if there were more to those quirks? What if there were signs that went ignored, moments that seemed insignificant at the time but held the weight of unimaginable truths? Neighbors would later recall an overwhelming smell coming from the Francois house, something they could never quite explain. His co-workers might remember fleeting moments of discomfort in his presence, though they couldn't put their finger on why. And then there were the women who seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving behind no trace. Could these small, seemingly disconnected moments have been enough to raise alarm? If someone had looked closer, would they have uncovered what lay hidden just beneath the surface? Or was Kendall Francois just another quiet man with his own peculiarities, living a life that was, for the most part, unremarkable? We often think we know the people in our lives, the neighbor we greet every morning, the colleague we share lunch with, the friendly face at the store, but how well do we truly know anyone? It's a question that lingers as we begin to uncover the unsettling reality of Kendall Francois, What would you do if someone you knew showed behaviors that didn't sit quite right with you? Would you speak up? Would you investigate? Or would you dismiss it as harmless as everyone else seemed to do? Between 1996 and 1998, a pattern of disappearances began to grip Poughkeepsie, though few at first connected them. Women were vanishing without a trace. Most were known to frequent specific areas of town, struggling to make ends meet through work on the streets. They were women who had families, friends, lives that mattered, yet society often overlooked them. Their disappearances barely made the headlines, and the urgency to find them faded almost as quickly as it began. Kendall Francois took full advantage of this indifference. He knew his targets, he knew their vulnerabilities. Offering money or assistance, he lured them into his home at 99 Fulton Avenue. Once inside, there was no escape. In the confines of that house, Francois carried out unimaginable acts of violence. He overpowered his victims with his size, strangling them until their lives were extinguished. But what made these acts even more disturbing was what followed. Francois didn't dispose of the bodies or attempt to cover his tracks in a way you might expect. Instead, he kept the remains of his victims within the walls of his family home. The attic, the basement, the closets, these spaces became macabre tombs, and all of this occurred while his family continued to live there. His parents and sister went about their daily lives, seemingly unaware of what was happening under their roof. The house reeked of decay, a stench so strong that neighbors occasionally complained. His family attributed the smell to plumbing issues or even dead rodents. They accepted explanations that, in hindsight, seem impossible to believe. But how could they not have known? This question has haunted those who later learned the truth. Did they turn a blind eye to the reality that something was gravely wrong? Or were they simply victims of a monstrous deception? The victims of Kendall Francois had names, faces, and stories. Wendy Myers, 30, Gina Barone, 29, Catherine Marsh, 31, Kathleen Hurley, 47, Mary Healy Giacone, 29, Sandra Jane French, 51, Audrey Pugliese, 34, Katina Newmaster, 25. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, each one deserving of the searchlights and headlines that their disappearances failed to garner. As the months turned into years, the cases grew colder. The missing were filed away as unsolved mysteries, their families left with unanswered questions and unending grief. And still, at 99 Fulton Avenue, Francois carried on as though nothing had changed. He went to work. He shopped in local stores. He interacted with neighbors. All the while, the evidence of his crimes surrounded him, hidden in plain sight. It would take one final harrowing act for the truth to come to light, a moment that would shock even the most seasoned investigators. But before that day came, Kendall Francois existed as a walking contradiction, a man whose life appeared outwardly ordinary while harboring the unthinkable. If you think this story is chilling, make sure to subscribe. There are more cases like this one that demand to be told, stories that remind us how little we sometimes know about the people around us. It was a quiet day in September 1998 when everything changed. A woman arrived at the police station, visibly shaken, her voice trembling as she recounted the ordeal she had just endured. She had been attacked by a man she thought she could trust, someone she'd been led to believe was just another ordinary person. But what she described to investigators was anything but ordinary. Her escape had been narrow, too close to imagine, and the details she provided painted a horrifying picture. The name she gave them was Kendall Francois, a man known in the community, a local figure with no prior record of violent crimes. On the surface, there was little to suggest that he could be capable of such an act. But the woman's testimony left no room for doubt. Something had to be done, and it had to be done quickly. Armed with this information, police obtained a warrant to search Francois's home at 99 Fulton Avenue. The house had already earned a reputation in the neighborhood for its overpowering odor, something that residents had occasionally complained about. Still, No one could have anticipated what investigators were about to find. As officers stepped inside, the smell hit them immediately, thick, nauseating, and unlike anything they had encountered before. Moving through the house, they were confronted with piles of clutter and chaos, an environment that made it difficult to navigate. But as they pushed further, they began to uncover the true source of the stench. Room by room, they discovered the remains of missing women. Some bodies had been hidden in the attic, others in the basement. The scenes were grim, and the scale of what they were witnessing began to sink in. These were not isolated incidents. This was something much larger. 8 women, each one a missing person, had been found within the walls of that house. The horror of what they were seeing was matched only by the questions that followed. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? How had Francois managed to carry out these acts without drawing more suspicion? As investigators pieced together the timeline, they realized that some of the victims had been reported missing years earlier. Families had pleaded for answers, filed reports, and waited for news that never came. And all the while, Francois had been living his life, going to work, interacting with others, and keeping up the facade of normalcy. Interviews with his family added another layer of complexity to the case. His parents and sister, who had lived in the same house, insisted they had no idea what was happening. They claimed the smell had been dismissed as a plumbing issue or attributed to rodents, but could they really have been unaware? Or was there a deeper level of denial at play, a refusal to confront the unthinkable? These were questions the investigators couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, Francois was taken into custody and questioned. His demeanor was calm, almost unnervingly so as he confessed to the murders. He gave detailed accounts of how he lured the women to his home, how he attacked them, and how he disposed of their bodies. There was no attempt to hide, no protest of innocence. He seemed resigned, as if this moment had been inevitable. The case sent shockwaves through Poughkeepsie and beyond. It was a stark reminder of how easily a predator could hide in plain sight, blending into the fabric of a community. It also raised difficult questions about the systems in place to protect the vulnerable. Could the police have acted sooner? Were there missed opportunities to connect the dots? And what responsibility did the broader community bear for overlooking the signs? The investigation into Kendall Francois' crimes was exhaustive, but it could never fully answer these questions. What it did reveal was the extent of his calculated actions and the devastating impact they had on the lives of his victims and their families. For those who lost loved ones, the discovery brought a mix of relief and anguish. Relief that the mystery was solved, and anguish at the brutal truth they now had to confront. Do you think this could have been stopped earlier? Could more lives have been saved if the signs had been recognized? Let us know your thoughts below. Cases like this remind us how important it is to remain vigilant, to pay attention to the small details, and to never dismiss the things that don't feel right. In the weeks following Kendall Francois' arrest, the town of Poughkeepsie was forced to confront a reality that seemed almost impossible to process. 8 women had disappeared over the course of 2 years, their lives stolen, their families left to grieve. The truth about what had happened inside 99 Fulton Avenue sent shockwaves through the community, leaving a lasting scar on those who lived there. Francois himself showed little emotion during the investigation and subsequent court proceedings. When confronted with the evidence, he admitted to the murders in a calm, detached manner. His confessions were chilling in their simplicity, as though he were recounting mundane events rather than horrific acts of violence. When asked why he committed these crimes, his response was as cold as it was revealing. Killing seemed easier than forming relationships. In 2000, Kendall Francois pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. By avoiding a trial, he also avoided the possibility of the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. For the families of the victims, the sentence brought some measure of closure, but it could never undo the pain of their loss or the years spent searching for answers. Inside the prison walls, Francois remained as unremarkable as he had been outside them. He spent his days in relative obscurity, largely keeping to himself. His health deteriorated over the years, and in 2014, at the age of 43, He died of natural causes while incarcerated. His death brought an end to a life defined by unspeakable acts, but the questions surrounding him continued to linger. How could someone live in such close proximity to others and commit these atrocities without detection? How did his family remain unaware, or at least fail to act on the mounting signs that something was terribly wrong? And what does this case reveal about the vulnerabilities of those who are often ignored or forgotten by society? For the town of Poughkeepsie, the memory of Kendall Francois remains a haunting chapter in its history. It serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can sometimes hide in plain sight and of the need to speak up when something doesn't feel right. The scars of this case will never fully heal, but the stories of the victims and their families will not be forgotten. As we bring this story to a close, it's impossible not to reflect on the many layers of this case. The life of Kendall Francois, the lives of his victims, and the unanswered questions left behind all paint a chilling portrait of a community shaken to its core. Each detail adds a new dimension to the story, and every revelation forces us to consider what might have been missed, what could have been done differently. Which part of this case shocked you the most? Was it the chilling way Francois went about his life while committing these acts, or the overwhelming stench in the house that went unexplained for so long? Perhaps it's the idea that someone can live among others, sharing the same spaces, the same streets, and still carry out such atrocities unnoticed. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and we want to hear what you think. And what about the victims? Their stories, their names, and their lives deserve to be remembered. Do you think society could have done more to protect these women, or that their disappearances should have sparked greater urgency? Share your thoughts. Let's have a conversation about what needs to change to ensure no one falls through the cracks again. If this story has moved you or left you questioning how something like this could happen, take a moment to like this video and share it with others. These stories, as difficult as they are, need to be told. By shedding light on them, we honor the memories of the victims and remind ourselves of the importance of vigilance and empathy. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We explore the stories that demand to be heard, the ones that stay with you long after the video ends. From unsolved mysteries to cases that redefine justice, we're here to bring you the stories that matter. And now we leave you with a question. How well do we truly know the people around us? Whether they're our neighbors, our colleagues, or even those we live with, what lies beneath the surface is often far more than we could ever imagine. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.